What's going on, guys? Today I'm here to bring you another H.A.T format market watch to talk about some of the price changes that you guys are going to want to know if you guys play H.A.T format or are trying to get into H.A.T format, just in general, in case there are cards that you need to pick up for your deck specifically, or if you have extra copies that maybe it's time to get rid of them because they've gone up in price, or just whatever. Really, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not telling you to go and buy out these cards. I'm not telling you to go and sell these cards. Do what you do with your own stuff. I'm just here to make you guys a little more aware of it. So with that being said, let's get straight into this, and the first card I want to talk about is going to be Constellar Plates. Now, we had recently got an update on the next Terminal World set, or I forget exactly what they're calling it, but in the little article we got for it, we did get confirmed that we are getting more Constellar support, as well as like Tellarknight and X-Saber support, which are a little less relevant to H.A.T format. Obviously, Tellarknights came out after the fact, and X-Saber isn't really relevant in H.A.T format exactly, and while most of the prices for the Constellar stuff actually, basically stayed the same, a lot of the DT higher end stuff was already kind of up in price, just because that stuff was already a little bit harder to get, and that stuff doesn't really populate as easily given how scarce it is and stuff like that. Most people who have a lot of the DT stuff are usually using it for their other past format decks, or just take, for example, Europe never got dual terminal, so they didn't really have as easy access to it, so if it's over there, it's usually kind of stuck over there in a way. But one thing that did go up over time, it's been, probably a week, I want to say, almost since we got that announcement, and one of the cards that actually did start seeing a little bit of a price hike is actually the QCR copies of Plates exactly. For a while, you can even see here on the graph that they are starting to go up. These had been about $3 to $3.50. Now we see about 17 listings, and they're at the about $7 mark. Now, keep in mind, by the end of the page, we're looking at almost $9, almost $10 if you really want to, mess with the cents and stuff. So this is something that is starting to go up a little bit. They do look really nice, but if you don't really care about the rarity, there are plenty of options to go around. Like I said, actually, if we look at like the market price on the DTs, these are actually down a little bit. They show like 50 something dollars for the, listed prices there, but you can get light plays for about 40 and even verified near mints for about 43. So if anything, these are kind of down from what they had been. So that's a little interesting. And like I said, there's just like the ugly gold rares, or, most people don't like that version of the gold. There's the other gold rares. There's some common shatter foils, the platinums, the secrets. There's a lot of very budget options. So just don't worry about it unless you're specifically going for the QCRs. Now, besides Plates, one other card that I want to talk about with Constellars is actually going to be Sombre. Sombre only has 2 printings, and that could mean that in that set, we might get an extra reprint of this. And even with it only having 2 printings, the original and then the Mega Pack Super, these actually didn't really move in price too much. Even though the graph is showing they're up, they're still very affordable. If we go down and try to find a near mint first verified, it's only about $3. Yeah, there's a lot available too. If you see, like, already on the first page, halfway down, we have near mint first, which usually when a new support comes out, usually these would be completely gone, but there are definitely plenty available. It's a great card, especially in H.A.T format. It's a really good card, actually. But in terms of modern play, maybe not as much. Even looking at the reprints, they're only about $2, so very affordable and plenty to go around. So that is something to keep in mind, that you don't have to worry about if you're wanting to play, for example, Constellar Artifact or something. The prices on those haven't really moved too much. The next card I want to talk about is Divine Dragon Knight Felgrand. This card hasn't had a reprint in a very long time, and we do see that a lot of these are still available. We see like 21 listings on the original Secret. The Mega Pack Secret has 34 listings, the Ghost have 48 listings, and the Altis have 31 listings. And if you compare the market prices, they're just about where they should be. But what was actually interesting with this is I actually opened a couple loose packs of Shadow Shadow Specters that I had lying around, and I pulled an Alti Felgrand, and so I was kind of curious just to see the price on it. So I went, and despite, the graph showing down and the price looking normal, first ed light plays for verified are looking at about $32, which again, it seems pretty normal. And here I'm going to go to the second page here and see if we can, if this wants to load, if we can get a near mint copy. There are a good amount available. Don't get me wrong, this isn't like some crazy thing where they are bought out or anything like that, but we're looking at right here, the first ed near mints are for verified are about $40. And again, that is like, it seems normal, it's an old alti and stuff. But what makes this kind of crazy is if we now go back to the other listings and look at the Ghost Rare copies, the Ghost Rare copies aren't far off from the altis. So like if we go down to the first ed for the Ghost Rare, we're looking at about $35, give or take. So for just a little bit more, you can actually get a Ghost Rare copy. And the crazy thing is, depending on how, these sellers grade their cards, a lot of the Ghost Rares do have a lot of scratches, so this card could potentially be pack fresh but have those scratches and therefore listed as a light play. And even getting into the near mint copies, if we can find a near mint, these are all light plays. Probably by the next page we'll have a near mint. So right here, near mint first verified for about $46. So if you're looking at near mints, you would at least personally, I would rather pay like $6 more and get a Ghost Rare over an Alti, though the Altis, the older Altis and stuff do look really nice, and I personally prefer both copies. But just, I thought that was kind of crazy that the prices are so similar on the Alti and the Ghost, as well as if we are taking that mindset that the near mint Ghost out of the pack, sometimes with those scratches, is going to be light play. You can technically get a light play Ghost for this like less than an Alti. So that was kind of wild, and it is a very playable card in any deck that can make a rank 8. For example, Sylvan is a good example. So that was another thing I just wanted to bring up. Similarly, Thunderspark Dragon also only has one printing, and this one just has the Ultra and the Alti. Both are actually at the same amount of listings, and this is kind of a similar situation to that Felgrand situation that I had mentioned previously, where if we go to the Alti here and we go and try to find a near mint first, there's a light play for about $7. And here, looking at near mint verified, we have like an unverified for about $9, and then a verified also for about $9, give or take $10. But then if we go back over to the ultra rares, the ultras here, while again, it shows that they're actually down in price. If we look, there's light plays for about $5, give or take. But then going to the first ed near mints, we see one here for about $8, and then after that on up to about $10. So at that rate, if you're paying almost the same price, you might as well go and get yourself a nice looking Alti. This doesn't see that much play in hat format. It has a kind of interesting effect based on the number of materials it has. It can either destroy all other face-up monsters on the field or destroy all cards the opponent controls. It's a cool card. It does technically have some niche play in some, random decks and stuff, but this was just something to keep in mind. And speaking of Thunder type cards, Mahunder is a single print rare. And while you wouldn't expect this to be the most relevant thing, the Watt Hunter Artifact or Artifact Thunder deck has been gaining popularity in hat format, so if that's something that you want to play, make sure to have your set of Mahunters. I had recently made one of these videos where I talked about Nikitama, and Nikitama was at the time like $1 or $1.50, and now they're actually on up to about $3, and if we look at the price of Mahunters for first eds and near mints, they're about $1, so, kind of following that same route. There's only about 67 listings, though I will say there are a lot around. This seller, for example, has 53 of them, so I don't see these necessarily going anywhere fast, but it is something that if that's a deck you want to play, I would suggest having your set of. Next up, Dark Greffer had a buyout on basically every version of it. We see everything from the commons only having, 17 listings and 23 listings, and here at a value of about $3.50. And this one says $3. Maybe if we click it, it'll be more or less. Here we see an unverified for about $4, and near mints are about $5 for commons, which is kind of wild to think about. We have super rares also in the $3 to $4 range. The DT's 7 listings with, almost $8. The secrets we'd expect to be expensive. The Turbo Pack Ultras are also really up. We see a market price of $28, but the lowest listing here is at almost $100. Let's see what those are actually looking like. We have light plays for about $100, and near mints, is this one English? This one's $120, give or take, and then $180 for an Ultra Turbo Pack. These do look really nice, but again, that is such a big increase in price if you want hollow versions. Even the super rare is, this one's showing 7 with a market price of 27, so I'm sure let's just click this. Looking at near mint, verified is about $25. So, and then even after that, if you look at it, it goes all the way up to about 60 by the end of the page. So that is something to keep in mind. This card has so much implications in so many different past formats. And even, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, I believe this is still at 1, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's at more. I know that I think Armageddon Night came back to more copies. I don't entirely remember, but in general, it just has a lot of past format implications. Infernity for Hat format being a prime example, as well as stuff like the Twilight deck is a deck that takes really good advantage of it. So if you do need these, you might be paying a pretty penny even for the common ones. Speaking of cards related to Infernity, the instant fusion target that a lot of people jump to if they can't afford the kind of expensive Camion wizards is going to be Dark Fire Dragon. This card also sees bits of play in things like GOAT format and stuff like that. And here we are actually seeing the 25th anniversary versions of the Dark Fire. That was the most recent reprint of this card, actually being worth a little bit of money here. If we scroll down here and let's see what these actually are at, we're looking at, $3, and by the end of the page, we're looking at about $5 to $6. So this is something to keep in mind, that even the cheap versions, only 20 listings, and a lot of these are just people with 1 or 2 copies. The most on the page is this one for about $5, a little over $5 with shipping, and they have 4 copies. So these could definitely go up in price pretty quickly. So this is something to keep an eye on. Now, usually you're only going to need about 1 copy for Infernity. Again, if you don't want to pay the crazy upcharge on a Camion wizard, which, we can only hope that gets a reprint at some point. But even besides that, all versions are worth at least a few dollars. We see even the commons are worth quite a bit, though that is a tournament pack card, so it sort of makes sense in that aspect. But that's just something to keep in mind there as well. Another card with only 1 reprint for a kind of fan favorite deck is going to be Gwennavir, Queen of Noble Arms. This card is actually really important for the Noble Knight strategy, is that is one of the few Noble Arms cards that just equips by itself, especially from graveyard. So very important card. We see the kind of gross platinum rares. I know most people don't really like those. Sorry if you do. With 40 listings, so plenty of these to go around at, only about $1 to $2. But if we look at the original print secrets, only 16 listings, and as you see, I have no filters on or anything like that. That's just the usual Yu-Gi-Oh filter, whatever that TCG automatically puts on. But here, only 16 listings, and if we click on this, the graph, again, I never trust this, it's going down, and you can get 1 light play for about, $4 to $5, and then after that, for near mint first, it looks like there's only light plays on the first page, so we will go to the second page here, and you're looking at almost $10 to $11 on up to $14 by the end of the page for just these copies of Gwennavir. Now, usually this is a 1 to 2 of in the Noble Knight deck in hat format, but you definitely do want to make sure you have your copies. Again, just a really, really good card for the deck, and again, only 2 printings, so that is something, again, to just keep in mind. After that, similarly, Labidorite Dragon, only has a super rare and a common as its printings. And so we have a clear, highest rarity for this. And this is a card that sees play in Hieratic Ruler. And for first ed near mints, I didn't even know this was that much in price. This was another card that I pulled in one of those Shadow Specters packs that I had. And, it's one of those cards that technically there are other cards that you can play in place of this. For example, was it Wattail Dragon is the other one that some builds would play, as well as there was the Luster Dragon number 2, I believe is what it was called. There was a lot of misprints with the supers where it just said, I think Luster Dragon, the green one. But most people are going to go with the Labidorite Dragon, and here we see a near mint first for about $5. And after that, we see Unlims, First Ed, Light Plays, Unlims, Moderates. So they do go up in price after that, almost up to $6 and even more by the end of the page. So this is another one of those cards that you only need 1 to 2 copies of, but just keep in mind that these are now worth a bit of money. I remember when these were basically under $1, and now we are seeing them start to slowly rise up in price. Another super niche card that I kind of came across when looking into certain things was going to be Mongju. Now, this card doesn't see that much play in hat format. There's a couple random ritual decks like the Herald of Perfection decks that will play Mongju, as well as you do have things like Gishki, and there's a couple other ones that sometimes will play it, but it's not even the craziest card because usually the decks, for example, like Gishki, have their own archetypal version of Mongju. But what I wanted to point out is there are a lot of different versions of this. You have cheap ultra rares for under $1. You have cheap super rares again for under $1. Here's another super for under $1, some commons and stuff like that. But the DT is actually a card that has been going up in price, and there's not that many listed. Originally, I thought this was because of the modern Necroz support, or maybe even people looking back at Necroz format, which is a possibility for sure. But it could also go back to how I mentioned with the Constellar stuff that the DT stuff doesn't usually repopulate that easily, though I will say that these were, pretty cheap for a while here. It's showing $5. So in terms of that, they haven't gone up too much, but there's only about 8 listings left. And here we see at the lowest $7, and after 1 or 2 listings, we're on up to $10+ all the way on up to 12 to 13. So if you do want your nice, DT copies, these are starting to rise in price. So that might be a card that, again, I'm not telling you to go out and buy, but if this was something that you were considering, you might want to get them before those couple listings are gone. These sellers do have a good amount. So if you're looking for exactly a playset, or if you only need 2 copies, this one has 9 copies. But after that, again, just they're available, but they are going to be going up in price. So just keep that in mind. Next up, a Centric Boy is another card that only has 1 printing. I believe this sees play in some other formats, but occasionally it will see play in hat format, as you're able to synchro with a card in your hand. So usually you synchro, or you summon this and synchro with a Thunder Dragon, and then you can make a Angel of Zera, and then when Angel of Zera leaves the field because of this, it will get banished, and then Angel of Zera's effect will bring itself back because it was banished. I think it's on your next standby or something like that, but only 17 listings of this single print card. I know for me, it took me a while to find these, and while we do have this seller with 3 light plays at about $250, after that, for, light plays, you're looking at $7, give or take. And for near mints, let's see, you're looking at almost $20, or actually it is just about $20 for near mints. And once these few listings are gone, they are gone. We have a damaged here at the end of the page for $75, which is obviously super ridiculous. You do have some cheaper copies, but this is one of those cards that, it just hasn't got a reprint, and it does from time to time see a little bit of play. So just keep that in mind. Or if you have these, maybe it's time to get rid of them, especially if they are near mint. Upstar Goblin is another card that just has so many different versions and printings, but all the printings are minimally $1, most of which are closer to $2 to $3, especially if you want like holo copies. We see like supers at the, market price of about $5, and, the first listing is about $3.50. Let's see if that's even near mint. Oh, for once it actually is. So about, $3 to $4 on that, or actually it looks like even these are just light plays, and then the near mints are about $5. But these are all worth some form of money, so if you do want holo copies, you will be paying for a little bit, and this is nothing that's really new. These have always kind of just been worth money over time. I remember when the Platinums first came out in the Bonanza set, I think they were pre-selling at like $3, and now we see them all the way on up in price to about $8 into $9. I know even a couple weeks ago at Nats, when I had done my recap and stuff, I had picked up the QCR copies of Upstart for I think 75 trade, and we already see that those are even up in price. This just has so much past format implications, and especially in hat format was a prime format for a lot of people going and using Upstart Goblin. Sometimes you'll see it in Mermail, sometimes you'll see it in Geargia, you'll see it in Sylvan. Any of the decks that really just want to try to basically play a 37 card deck are going to want to play Upstart, and, every version is worth a little bit of money. So this is one of those cards that, would it be good to get another reprint? Yeah, sure. But even then, we might even see it go up in price again for the reprints if we ever get it. So it's one of those cards that just in general, it's played in so many things that you're going to want to make sure you have at least one set of. Speaking of cards that you're going to want to make sure you have a set of, a basically staple side deck card in hat format and several other formats is going to be Debunk, and this is a card with only 3 printings. It has its common, its super, and its secret, and this is another card that has kind of been up for a while, and it just hasn't got a reprint. Would it be great if it did? Yeah, of course it would be, but all versions are worth money. We even see the commons here worth a few dollars, about $3 to $4 for near mint commons. And if you want your really shiny versions, for example, your secrets, I believe last I checked these were at about $12 to $13. We'll see. Yeah, they are still about $12 all the way by the end of the page on up to $16. And this is again a card that usually decks will side 2 to 3 copies of. In hat format specifically, it stops a lot of those hand traps, as well as a lot of graveyard effects, the hands, Mermail cards, Lannian cards, the Dragon Rulers. Just a very good card, and again, only 3 printings. This is a card you're going to want to make sure you have, so just make sure you do. And the last card I want to talk about is just QCR Marauding Captain. This card is, again, one of those cards that very niche play in certain decks. Lately, I've been talking a bit more about the Iron Chain deck that I had a lot of people really enjoy, and I noticed that one of my copies was a little messed up, so I went to go check the price, and there's actually only 16 listings of this left. I know when I got mine, they were about $3, and now they're basically doubled in price at about $6 on up to $7. So this was one of those cards that, I didn't expect to really go up in price. I think there might be some past formats like closer to the GOAT era that actually play Marauding Captain, even into, the future of the game. I know during when Assault and stuff was out, some people even messed with that because it's a warrior that also gets a warrior out of hand. So just in general, one of those cards to keep an eye on if, you were hoping to get some high rarity versions. There's plenty of other rarities of Marauding Captain, but the QCR specifically is getting a little low on listings, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, guys, that is it for today's hat format market watch. Hopefully, you could learn something from this. Again, whether it's a card that maybe you need to pick up now, or maybe it's cards that you might want to consider getting rid of. But either way, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like on it, comment any questions or videos you want to see in the future, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get notified anytime I put a new video out, share this video with your friends, and anyways, guys, I will see you in the next video.